Greetings, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's operator meeting. I am Hannah Hickam, the executive assistant, and I will be your host for today. And we're just going to give folks a few minutes to jump on. I know that people getting on right at 9 is probably not going to happen. So as soon as the participant number levels off, we'll go ahead and get started. And thank you for that first question in the chat there. I think we're going to get to all of the questions at the end, but do please chat them in as they come to you, and we will make sure to get good answers for those at the end of the presentations. Thank you, everyone, for your patience as we're waiting for folks to get on. It looks like the participants are still climbing, so we'll just give them another moment or so. All right, it looks like the number of participants has leveled out, so we'll go ahead and get started. The first person up is, I believe, Stephen Schwartz with the Oakwood Group and the Form 2B release. Just give me one moment to make that transition. All right, Stephen, you can take it away. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Hannah. Hello, everyone. I'm Stephen Schwartz. I'm one of the oil and gas location assessment specialists here at COGCC, and I will be talking to you today about the eForms release of the Form 2B. Next slide, please, Hannah. So the Form 2B is now available on eForms. Previously, we were using an interim Form 2B, which was an Excel spreadsheet, until the eForms version was finished with development. It was now released overnight, and it comes in two different forms. There's the full Form 2B, the cumulative impacts data identification required as part of every OGDP. And then when you go to start a brand new Form 2B in draft, there will also be an option for a partial Form 2B. This is required by Rule 803B2 Big A only when converting an existing production well into an injection well. That is the only condition in which you'd use that partial one. Otherwise, the normal full Form 2B will be the one most people will use as part of every OGDP. Next slide, please, Hannah. So while we strive to find as many of the bugs as possible in testing, some of them do make it out of the testing environment and to go live. So if you encounter any technical eForms related errors or questions, please email myself at steven.schwarz@state.co.us and include three key pieces of information in your email: a description of the error, the document number of your form in draft, and a screenshot of the error or problem being described. I will then communicate that error to our development team to fix it. This next part is really important. Do not reach out directly to our IT team. We have set up a specific pathway to expedite these sort of eForms error fixes internally. So please email them to me and I will get them properly communicated over. Staff, most likely myself, will communicate with you when the errors have been resolved, or if we need a little bit more information for our development team to properly fix what you're describing. Next slide, please, Hannah. So as a reminder, the Form 2B document number must be on every Form 2C and the OGDP hearing application. If you've already submitted an interim Form 2B spreadsheet attached to a Form 2C, the eForms version of the Form 2B must be submitted to replace that Excel spreadsheet. Only the eForms version can upload the data into the database, which is why it is key that this eForms version is submitted. The OGLA group will be working with those operators who have already submitted interim Form 2B spreadsheets to have that attachment removed once the eForms version of the Form 2B is submitted. Additionally, the OGLA group will work to update any in-process Form 2Cs with that Form 2B document number, again, once the eForms version has been submitted. And finally, hearings and/or the permitting group will communicate directly with operators that have already submitted OGDP hearing applications with the interim Form 2B attached to the Form 2C language if changes are needed. And they'll be reaching out directly with specific instruction on what they're looking for if changes are needed. Next slide, please, Hannah. Now that the Form 2B is available, only that eForms version will be accepted. We will no longer be accepting the interim Form 2B spreadsheet on Form 2Cs. You need to submit your information on the eForms version of the Form 2B. Now, in terms of guidance, the guidance that was previously released this winter is still valid. The data field questions and the order of the questions that were on that Excel spreadsheet have not changed. It's just now in the eForms version. We are working on additional final 2B guidance, which will eventually include a Form 2B checklist spreadsheet. These guidance documents are forthcoming. Once that final guidance is released, the older guidance from December and January will be archived. However, until then, that guidance will continue to live on the website. Next slide, please, Hannah. As a reminder, under SB 19181, mission change guidance, right now there are the three guidances that will remain, and they are still valid. The Form 2B overview from December 15th, the cumulative impacts data identification guidance from January 15th, and the part 2 of that guidance from January 21st. What has been or will shortly be removed is the interim Form 2B spreadsheet itself. Next slide, please, Hannah. So that's all I have for you today. The eForms Form 2B version should be live, and if there are any questions, please send them my way. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you so much, Stephen. And we'll take questions at the end, but please still do chat those in as they come to you. Next up, we have the H2S guidance with Mike Leonard. Mike, I think you can unmute yourself and just take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Hannah. I really don't have a lot. I just wanted to mention that the H2S guidance has been finalized by staff. Will be posted on the mission change guidance page today. We should have it out there, and we'll be open for comments from there.
Great. Thank you, Mike. Next up will be Jane with the Reclamation Inspection Status Report. So just give me a moment or two to make that transition. Might be a little bit more than a moment or two, but I'll be quick. Come on. All right, Jane, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Hannah. Good morning, everyone. Jane Stanzik. I just wanted to let you know that we have made available on the website the Reclamation Inspection Status Report. It's a report that staff has used for years. The reclamation staff uses it, and the financial assurance staff uses it. And from time to time, operators have contacted the folks in those groups and asked them if they would run the report and send them a copy. So we've decided to make it available for everyone to run for themselves. So these slides are just going to show you where it is on the website. Next slide, please, Hannah. So if you go to data, you'll see that the Reclamation Inspection Status Report has been added to the list of searches that you can run. Next slide, please, Hannah. So you just enter your operator number. Next slide, please, Hannah. And the report generates an Excel spreadsheet. You don't get a web page version. It just comes right out in an Excel file. And there are potentially 4 sections: the failed reclamation status section, interim site reclamation status section, no reclamation status, which means no reclamation inspection has occurred. And then the 4th one is past reclamation status. But the tricky thing is that if you don't have any wells in one of these categories, the category won't appear at all. It just won't show up. But these are the 4 potential categories that this report generates. Next slide, please, Hannah. Oh, actually, Hannah, can you go back? I'm sorry. So you can see, oh, not that far back. So you can see that there are a number of columns in the report. It does print out by county and then by well. It aggregates all the wells in each county, sums them up in a subsection. But you can see the column headers. There are several different columns that are statuses. So you can find the decoder ring for those statuses on the website. Next slide, please, Hannah. So if you go to help, right out there on the home page, it takes you to the help page. And the first list in the help page, on the help page, are codes. So you can see one of the codes is inspection types /statuses. Next slide, please, Hannah. If you click that, you get a web page that lists exactly that. It's inspection types and inspection statuses. However, I looked just now and this page doesn't come up on the external website for some reason today. So we will get that fixed so you can access these codes from the help page. And that's all I had, just showing you a new resource that's available for everyone. So you don't have to ask staff to run the report anymore, and you can see the status of your inspections. Anyway, that's it. So as Hannah always says, we do all the questions at the end. Thanks, Hannah. Thanks, everybody.
Great. Thank you so much, Jane. Next up, we have Sean Kellerby with the Compliance Unit Stormwater Inspection Methods and Resources. And Sean, sorry for spelling your name wrong on the agenda. And give me just a moment to drag this over here and present. And then Sean, you may take it away. Hopefully you can unmute yourself. Oh, maybe I can unmute you. Oh, there we go.
You hear me now?
Yes, excellent.
All right, thank you. That's okay, Hannah. Everyone spells my name wrong, so. Thank you, everybody. My name's Sean Kellerby. I'm the field inspection supervisor in Northwest Colorado. I've been with the commission for 14 years, and I appreciate the opportunity to provide a viewpoint from the field regarding stormwater and what we see day to day with boots on the ground. Next slide, please. So the compliance unit, we have really two sides, field inspection and the reclamation specialist group. The easiest way to think about that is the reclamation is there at the beginning and the end, specifically thinking about stormwater, and the field inspectors are the operations people in the middle, although we're not precluded from doing inspections at any time with any of us. Next slide, please. So I put this on here, the compass. I don't recall, somebody somewhere told me with a compass there's 360 different ways to look at anything. It's important for a field inspector to remember that, because a landowner is going to see things different than an operator versus a recreational land user versus somebody that lives by Wash Park in Denver. They're all going to have a different perspective. We got to stay in the middle of that 360 degrees to be able to do our job and be a public servant and be firm, fair, and consistent. Field inspectors, in essence, we're trained observers, whether we're doing stormwater operations, reclamation. That's really what our skill set becomes when we come to work for the Oil and Gas Commission. So, we are trained observers. We're not implementing stormwater or any of the other things we do. We're simply observing. Standardized training, we use the same training I think that industry does. There may be some training I'm not aware of. Every training I've ever done, I've done most all of mine in Grand Junction when 521 Drainage Authority was still a thing, and there would always be the operator folks in the same class with us. So we do have that common viewpoint for stormwater training. And then our work methods are, we have written and photographic documentation. That's how we're going to communicate to operators, citizens, or any interested parties what we're seeing when we're out there in the field. Next slide, please. And we got to remember we have both internal and external customers. I have to provide information to our internal customers in Denver, and I have a variety. Pretty much anybody, any animal, any living creature is an external customer when it comes to stormwater. Next slide, please. So inspection results. The easiest way to think about this when we do our field inspections is, if everything's good, green, I put no comments needed. We put comments on there. What I should have said was that there's no corrective actions required for that. So you're good to go. You're right on where you probably should be, at least in our view. Caution, that's probably the meat of everything we do. We're seeing some chinks in the armor, but not necessarily causing us a problem at that time. So we'll put comments in there, and oftentimes corrective actions are required to hopefully start that process of getting the right people in the right locations to evaluate stormwater so that we can get those corrected before they become a problem. And then red, that's when we have a mitigation need. We've already caused an impact to the resources of the state of Colorado. Now we need to stop that activity and we need to mitigate the damage that we've already caused. Next slide, please. So there's several rules associated with stormwater. I stole this from Denise Arthur in one of her presentations. It was perfect. I didn't need to change a thing. So the rules are, you can break these down, such as Denise did. And that's really the direction that I took this presentation. Next slide, please. So location information as a field inspector. First thing I need to do is know exactly where I am. Where am I going? Stormwater is going to be the same in the northeast corner of the state and the southwest corner of the state, but the location information may be a little bit different. So the needs may be a little different. This is a location from right here in Northwest Colorado. That star represents a location real time that I wanted to use for this presentation. The blue there represents some surface water protections that the rules have and is indicated on our map. And the stream is marked on there, as well as all the different well pads in the area in the section. So that's just a starter. Next slide, please. I threw a Google map on there. Again, you can see the locations without the red. What's important here, I think, when we talk about stormwater, is that creek that runs through there. The river would be up there above the word information. That's the Colorado River. So one of the things that we hear about in the field is with rulemaking is the idea of cumulative impacts. Certainly you could make that argument with the amount of well pads that we have along the creek that, multiply that. If we have one violation and we find that as far as an operational SOP for an operator, you can multiply that by 10, 20, however many wells are impacting that creek. So as field inspectors, we're also looking at not just that particular location, but overall operations for that field. Next slide, please. And again, just some more, that's the same slide with that protected surface water. And then as I turn the layers on the map, that red represents a CDPHE groundwater protection, Reg 42 area. Next slide, please. And then all that yellow there, that is wildlife protections. So often anywhere in Colorado, and especially in Northwest Colorado, we have multiple layers of wildlife protections. So we're talking about habitat, water quality, riparian areas. I mean, there's any number of issues. Again, with this, I think there's another slide, you can see it better, but the U.S. Fish and Wildlife even has waterway inventory areas that are included right next to this particular well. Next slide, please. So this is a, just a view of what we're doing as we show up. We're kind of looking, if you see, this is a 4-acre disturbed area. Above it is a slope coming on. So we're going to start thinking, okay, we got a large disturbance, run-on protections. We need some slope stabilization. On the other side of that is a down gradient. Sometimes it's a fill slope. In this case, there's not a fill slope, but it's still a down gradient to the creek. We have the creek marked on there, and then we have that lease road that runs in this case, I didn't measure it exactly. I'm going to say it's a little over a mile, but we have some areas in Northwest Colorado that are literally 40 miles of lease road, private road. So all of that, if you're right in the middle of that, you got 20 miles of designated lease road that are going to be part of that stormwater inspection. So we begin to put all those pieces together so that we kind of have a game plan when we're looking for BMP'S. Next slide, please. So the one common thing is the CDOT erosion control field guide. All of us that at least went through altitudes stormwater, this is kind of the guide that we use in Colorado. Our rules don't prescribe, the specific BMP'S, but they give us a pretty good general idea. I've done some research. I've looked around the country. Municipalities, they generally have exactly the same sort of BMP'S recommended. Sometimes they're a little different. I think Indiana Tracking Pad, they say 50 feet or longer as needed. Colorado says 70 feet. So there's a few little differences like that, but I think it's pretty much an industry standard. And this is really a great resource that I use all the time, and the field inspectors use all the time. Next slide, please. So corrective actions needed. These are again already there's been a need for some mitigation. There's already been an impact to the resources that we're looking after as field inspectors. In this case, BMP maintenance, you can see that silt fence has been overrun. We're starting to move sediment and it's choking out that vegetation, which I'm sure everyone knows that, it's a chain reaction. We start losing that root structure. We start getting more erosion on the other side, and it just migrates toward the creek. Everything, water is going to go to the lowest point, and it's pretty easy to trace out. The other slide, that's actually a tank battery where water and sediment got into the tank battery, filled it up, and is going out the other side. And the problem with this particular facility is it was built really in the plane of the creek, so difficult area to operate. Next slide, please. BMP maintenance, the slide on the left, pretty good attempt. But I just looking at that photo, I'd say there probably wasn't adequate run-on controls. There might have been some improper installation of that BMP. And the end result is we've blown out the middle of that thing, and we're kind of back to square one. That's time and money for that operator. Certainly if we have any ability to help, we don't want to see that happen. So, I don't think the operator does either. The photo on the right does not indicate a good velocity control. However, I put this in here. Behind it was somewhat effective in removing silt, but it wasn't maintained. And as you can see, it actually increased the velocity of the stormwater flow on the left side. And that velocity is actually removed even more sediment than might have happened had that not been there. So corrective actions will be on the inspection. And those are things, again, that are gonna need some immediate attention. Next slide, please. We see some good stuff out there. you've got some angled rock, different size. We've got this culvert armored pretty well. Vegetation growing on each side of it, perfect. And then that silt fence is put up and properly put up, and I don't see any sort of disturbance on either side. So and it's doing its job. Next slide, please. So, excuse me, tracking is probably one of the biggest issues that we deal with stormwater. It certainly is the most impactful. Some of those slides you saw, it can take quite a while for rainstorms. We get, in the Western Slope, depending on if you're in Steamboat or Grand Junction, obviously, but you're getting, 30-ish rainstorms or more a year, or precipitation events, actually a little bit more than that, but it's going to take quite a while. But a water truck, especially a frac crew or something like that, they can move more sediment in an afternoon than Mother Nature will in probably years. So it needs immediate attention, and really it needs thought even before those activities are conducted. So they're easy to take pictures of, they're easy to put on the inspection. Rutting is just like reeling. Rutting is a pretty good indication. Well, it's a great indication that we're moving sediment. So you're going to see that pretty consistently on any inspection. Next slide, please. Locations, again, no stabilization. That's where it's going to start. So when we see that rutting, we see that tracking, we're going to follow that, and we're looking for BMP'S to remove that sediment. Are we using a tracking pad? There's many different ways to prevent this from moving, but we want to see that that's being accomplished. And if it's not, again, corrective actions will be on the inspection. It may be a maintenance. You might need to maintain that BMP or put something in. Maybe it's something that got missed or needs to be reevaluated in a lot of cases. But the key point here, I think, is there was no stabilization. Had there been stabilization to start with, that kind of nips it in the bud. But when there is no stabilization there, then we're going to have to go a little further downstream to try and figure out what the BMP is that is removing that sediment. Next slide, please. And here's what we really want to prevent is getting that. This is on a county road. Vehicles are driving through that. Any number of things. That's exactly the opposite of I think what stormwater is designed to do in the integrity of a stormwater program. So when we start seeing this, then we really have a systematic failure that I think in some cases, probably needs to be evaluated pretty closely because we got something going wrong. Our part of that is those inspections, photos, documentation, and that's how an operator will know that we're concerned about damage to the resources of the state. Next slide, please. All right, so I added this one, CDOT sweeping BMP'S. I specifically, I'm not going to read through this whole thing, but the last bullet point, do not use kick brooms or sweeper attachments. Oftentimes I will see, or they'll even tell me when we get sediment on the roadway, well, we'll bring a sweeper out there. Well, you got to clean up the mess. Pushing the sediment into the bar ditch is really compounding the problem. You're just mechanically increasing the movement of sediment. So it's got to have some way to vacuum that up, some way to get that sediment up off the road. So that seems to be a misconception that I think we see from the field in a lot of cases. Next slide, please. So again, this is out of the CDOT manual. This is what CDOT says is a good tracking pad. It has the geotextile underneath it to keep it from pushed down in the mud. Keep it functional. You've got the depth of that gravel. It really acts as a scrubbing brush. And then of course the length and the width is prescribed. So we're not looking for something that's built exactly like that necessarily, but whatever the BMP is installed should function equally well. And I think that's really what we're looking for out there. Next slide, please. So dust, if it's not mud, it's dust. It's maybe not always thought about as erosion, but you have to control dust as well. Again, stabilization can help you with whether it's mud or dust. But we see that quite a bit in Northwest Colorado, and I'm sure all over the state. Next slide, please. And same thing, wind erosion. Craig, our Southeast supervisor, had sent me an email yesterday, so I threw this slide in there. It's a problem anywhere around the state. When we see this, we'll put it on our inspections. All kinds of erosion, wind erosion, stormwater. You're not protecting that stored material. Next slide, please. And again, CDOT comes out of here for temporary perimeter sediment barriers. They're going to give you, you see the little red thumb. That's telling you that's not good. There's a lot of little photos like that. Some green thumbs up, red thumbs down as you go through there. Next slide, please. And here we got a couple examples of some tracking pads that do not look like that CDOT pad. However, they work equally well. These pads on the left, I've noticed, at least in Garfield County, the construction industry uses these quite a bit. I believe they're pretty portable, temporary in nature, and I see them quite a few places. This one on the right is pretty well designed. It looks like it's pretty functional. Next slide, please. All right, so controls along roads and ditches. So like I said, we might have a couple mile stretch. Sometimes it's just a few feet up to I've got one that's probably 40 miles from start to finish. So every time there's a culvert along there, we're gonna look at that. This photo on the right's got a check dam. There's just really not a lot good about that particular BMP. Again, wasted money, wasted effort. I hate to see that, but that's what we see when we get on there. So it's going to be a corrective action. The photo on the right, I almost, I wasn't there, or at least if I was, I don't remember taking that picture, but the culvert's almost the victim there. You can see that the problem is above that culvert. So, how the road was graded, maybe how the stormwater is allowed to run down that road, but it is using that as its exit point and causing erosion around that culvert. And then the culvert may have some issues on its own. So, just because it's a BMP, it might be a part of the problem as well. Next slide, please. So again, the photo on the left, there's really nothing there, and you can see stormwater running down the road. It's going to find its path of least resistance, and we'll typically see debris and stuff start moving off the roadway. And down at the bottom there is a natural water channel, which is considered, waters of the state. So that's one of the big things that we're protecting when we're out there. The photo on the right is this one was draining, if I remember right, 13 or 14 acres total disturbance through a small hunk of casing. That's not even a corrugated pipe that they put underneath there. A couple rocks on there. I'm not sure what the function of that was supposed to be, but this thing, it just backs up. You can just see how the sediment has backed up. It basically is serving as a retention feature, I think, you know. So it's not designed, it's not near big enough to drain the area that it was designed or should have been designed to drain. Next slide, please. Left, same, that's the same photo. It's just a photo there to show, you know, this is an example of what you'll see on the inspections. Again, we're going to give you written and photographic documentation of what we're finding out there. We want to communicate whatever problems the best that we can. So we really rely heavily on photographs. The photo on the right doesn't look real bad yet, but that's a disaster waiting to happen. We're already losing vegetation. You got exposed soil. So we're going to start losing that soil. It'll start expanding and we'll lose even more vegetation and we'll start moving sediment. So therefore, corrective action needed. Next slide, please. Some more culverts. So I think I've made it clear, I hope. Culverts are a problem. They often don't get the maintenance they need. The photo on the left, I don't know exactly what was going on, but probably during the construction phase, something didn't work out real well. So we're getting some erosion around the culvert right there, and water is finding its own path. And this one on the right, this is fairly typical, especially in Northwest Colorado with the elevation changes that we have. There's a culvert there, they gravelled the road, but that material is allowed to just migrate down the side of the road. And it gets in these drainages, and again, it makes things worse. We're killing vegetation, you know, really altering the structure of that drainage. And once that happens, stormwater is going to create havoc. It's best to manage that at the source and not let that ever happen, because once something like that happens, it's got to be a nightmare to do mitigation on something like that. Next slide, please. So again, some good examples. The one on the left, you see some angled, different sized rock in there. For velocity controls, we see some engineered you know, elements of that culvert and armoring around that. It looks like they could still use some stabilization, you know, off to the sides. I don't know exactly what was going on there, but maybe this photo was taken while it was being constructed. At any rate, it looks pretty good there. And then the photo on the right, now you've got two BMP'S working in concert there. So together, they're going to protect that unstabilized soil there that you see behind it. So we got the silt fence, and you know, they've ripped up against the grain with the way stormwater is going to go. So those are pretty effective. Next slide, please. Kind of going along with the wind erosion, this one on the left. So, and this is where maybe reclamation might come in. We'll also write this up as the operations people. If there's going to be some a pad built or whatever, we want to see some silt fence. There needs to be BMP'S in place before the construction starts. They were building this pad. There was not a BMP there, except for if you look just over there, you can see a hay bale back there. So they did have a little bit. It was down gradient, which would work, except the footprint of this pad was much larger than their installed BMP'S. So you have to work within your BMP if you're going to put something out there. There's a pond right behind this, and then the Colorado River is right behind that. So there wasn't much room for error in that case. over here on the right side, you know, so sometimes these are, people will try and tell us that these are tracking devices. You don't really get the rotation, the revolution of the tires to act if it's just one like that. But even if you do, you can see in this case it's working because it's dumped a lot of mud in there. But the fact that it wasn't, it's not maintained, is going to take a lot of that effect away. Next slide, please. And then road maintenance here on the left. We see this all the time. They blade the road. If you don't have stabilization, you're blading the road. We see this a lot in the winter time. We'll see it bladed over the BMP. So if there's a berm out there, if your blade operator is pushing that material over, then you've defeated the purpose of that berm. In this case, there's nothing there. So it's just getting pushed straight into that drainage. It goes, that's I-70 there, the river's right there on the other side of that. And we see that all over the place. This other one, I don't know what happened. That's obviously not a installed BMP. Something's gone wrong right there. Looks like it's silted in. But without maintenance, it's gonna expand. It's gonna compound the damage. And again, that's something that there needs to be immediate action taken care of there. The one on the left is maybe a evaluation of an SOP, maybe installing some better BMP'S. You know, that's a long-term bridge right there. That's not temporary. So you might as well have a long-term plan in place. Next slide, please. Again, this is out of the CDOT manual. You know, there's a lot of helpful installation tips on there. This is a check dam, and we use it as well. It just kind of gives us a standard. The operator is a standard, you know, a concerned citizen, landowner, anybody that's concerned. This gives us a talking point so that we all have the same reference point. Next slide, please. And then these are a couple, again, good BMP'S. This one on the left, that's a photo I took. Probably one of the best ones I've seen. You can see the schmuck that's grown in the water, that it's certainly, we have some good retention there. So if we have that there, we're not moving sediment along either. The one on the right is a temporary BMP. You know, not trying to say that that's a perfect in design. I didn't take this photo. I don't know the exact story. There's a construction surface disturbance on the left side, and it looks like we have undisturbed surface on the right side. So at least at the time of this photo, that BMP is functioning and it's offering good protection. And you can see it's been roughened, you know, so that even that slope is offering some stabilization. If a temporary, you know, if a rainstorm comes in, you have a couple days of rain, it's not going to blow your BMP apart. Next slide, please. So again, CDOT, I referenced that several times through here. Slopes, you know, tracking, silt fence. These are all, you know, a toolbox of things that someone installing BMP'S might use. So, and it goes through and shows you how to properly install those. Next slide, please. And here we got, you're going to put a drain. You know, it's pretty prescriptive on what you need to do. You got some rock, you got to stake your drain. You got a little check dam at the top. And then on the right, again, corrective action needed. We see stuff like this, not terribly uncommon. I don't know what went on there. You know, I just have no idea. But it certainly doesn't look like what the installation might have been ideal anyway, on the left-hand photo or drawing, I guess. Next photo, please. Or excuse me, next slide, I should say. So here we got some unstabilized slopes. This is very common in Northwest Colorado. You'll see the rocks, they're just peeling out of that slope. It wasn't built right to start with, and Mother Nature just tears it apart constant. We like I said, it's very common, and it requires a lot of work to remediate that and to stop that. It really is something that ideally should be done during the construction phase. I think maybe some of these older pads are, maybe it was just looked at different at one time, and now in 2021, we have a problem. It can successfully be done, but it does take some effort. The photo on the right, we got a drain. Again, I don't know the story on that, but obviously we don't have any stabilization on that slope. So I don't know. I'm not sure. Sometimes you don't know when you're an inspector. You go out there and this is all you see, and you can't know as an inspector everything you need to know. So again, maybe that is a time for communication between that operator, that inspector, to say, hey, this is what was going on, or that was just there for an hour and then we did this or that. Communication is very helpful to us, and I'm sure the operator as well. Next slide, please. Same thing here. We had some stabilization on this pad, and then something else happened. I don't know what. Looks like they covered up what little stabilization they had and created another problem. So we'll see things like that. And then on the right, again, typical, we see that rilling, and that rilling and rutting on a location it's the same thing. This one, I can tell you where the sediment's going because it's laying all around them rocks. But if it's on a location, then, maybe it's out there on the county road. Either case, it's not where it should be. There's some BMP'S to correct that situation, but doesn't look like any of those are in use. So corrective actions needed, and that's what you'll see on that inspection. Next slide, please. So this has changed a little since I put this together. I put that this is successful. We're gonna have to go look at this again. It may be successful. I think that's hydromulch, and you can see on the photo on the right that if that's the case, we're gonna have problems with that. There's gonna be erosion going on there. If that has blankets on it, then it would be okay. But I think in this case that might have been hydromulch. So, but in any case, one of those earlier photos with the rocks coming down was this slope. So it's certainly better than it was. But again, we're in a situation where time and money was spent and maybe wasted. I don't want to see that. I'd like to see efficiency, and I'm sure the operator would too as well. Along with protecting the resources of the state, which is what we're out there to do. Yeah. So I don't know what. I'll reserve judgment until we go back out there, but I did throw those photos in there, and I chose to leave them in there just so I could make that point. And my initial thought was those were okay. I've only seen these in photos only. I haven't been on this location yet. Next slide, please. All right, so if I had one thing everyone can remember, again, this is out of the CDOT manual. This is at the end. Go back to that compass. Every single person, it doesn't matter which one of those 360 degrees you're looking at. We all have a role to play in stormwater and protection of the resources of the state. So if you ask yourself these questions, have routine inspections been performed? Each one of us has a role in that. I may not perform the inspection. I'm the regulator that's out there writing that up. You may be the one that performs that inspection, or you may be the administrative person doing that. You may be the landowner. You may just be an end user. Whatever the case is, if we all ask ourselves these 10 questions, I think we have a common language that we can speak. And I think overall that's going to help with the confusion. Sometimes there's this idea of inconsistent application in stormwater. I don't think that's true. I think if we use the same BMP'S and the same design principles and practices, and those are, especially if they're put in initially, and that's the goal in mind, we're better for that. Certainly, it's got to be more challenging to operate a oil and gas pad for 30 years than to build a 7-Eleven. Your stormwater challenges are going to be much shorter in duration, but the challenges are going to be the same. So the thinking and the design, I would encourage people to think about that up front. And if that ship has sailed, then the mitigation is just as important. What can you do now? Where are you at? And that's what we're trying to spur, is that conversation with our inspections, and we'll be as helpful as we can to get there. Last slide, next slide, please. So that's my presentation. Again, thank you for listening and listening to this field point of view. If you have any questions, you guys can always give me a call. Again, I didn't put my phone number, but I'm in Northwest Colorado. My name's Sean Kellerby, and I am the field supervisor for the compliance unit. Thank you.
Awesome, great presentation. Thank you so much, Sean. So we'll move on to the questions, and I'm just gonna start at the top, and whoever wants to answer can jump in. The first question is re-lighting plan, or regarding the lighting plan. Does the person with relevant expertise in light mitigation techniques and design have to be licensed / certified professional / engineer?
Hannah, I'll take that.
Great.
They do not have to be an engineer, but they must have provable, if that's a word, experience, or extensive experience in lighting technology. It's kind of laid out in the statement of basis and purpose. They need to have that industry experience in lighting technology to work through that plan.
All right, thank you, Mike. And, oh, sorry. The next question is, Class 2 commercial injection facilities do not produce any resources. Are they required to file an OGDP?
Thanks, Hannah. I'll take that question. So in this answer, there's kind of several parts to this answer. Yes, it is required by Rule 803B1. Underground injection of exploration and production waste is an oil and gas operation, and therefore for a new Class 2 UIC facility, an approved oil and gas development plan, Form 2A, Form 2B, Form 2C are required prior to submitting the Form 2 for that. However, under Rule 803B2, if an operator is converting an existing production well to an injection well without additional surface disturbance or other significant modifications to the location, and therefore a Form 2A would not otherwise be required pursuant to Rule 304A, the operator would only need to submit the Form 2 accompanied by the partial Form 2B that was referenced in Stephen Schwarz's training this morning, or his notice about the eForm 2B. The partial Form 2B is necessary to ensure that the CITER database includes comprehensive data set about incremental cumulative impacts associated with new oil and gas operations. So Rule 803B2B, even if an operator is not required to submit an oil and gas development plan application and the accompanying Form 2A, et cetera, for a conversion well, the director may still request as part of the technical review a subset of information or plans that are required under 304 if staff determines that those are necessary to consider incremental and beneficial impacts of the conversion, or to make a determination about the protection of public health, safety, welfare, the environment, and wildlife resources. And so a place that you can reference more information about that is in the SBP for the 800, 900, 1200 series. SBP is Statement of Basic Purpose. See pages 32 and 33. And then, just look at the other related 300 series for the requirements for an injection well. And that was a long answer, so, we will post our answers to these questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Greg. The next question is, on Form 2B, any submitted prior to today via the spreadsheet does not need to be redone with the now released Form 2B, correct?
And I think John Noto was going to grab the Form 2B questions. John, are you there?
He is not a host. Hold on just one moment.
Oh, okay. I can go ahead and answer them then.
Well, I can make him a host pretty
Okay.
easily. I just made you a host, John. You can go ahead and unmute yourself, and my apologies about that. Hopefully. Great. Oh, here we go. Sorry. Now you're a host.
Okay. Hi, this is John Noto. I can take these Form 2B questions. And that first one was on the Form 2B, any submitted prior to today via the spreadsheet does not need to be redone with the now released Form 2B. The question is right. The answer is that we'll work with the operators on these. There are a few Form 2Bs that are on the interim spreadsheet. Will allow those applications to continue to move forward, but as we have stated, since the interim Form 2B was released, there's a requirement to update the submittal to the eForm during the review process, and this allows that data to go into our system. And I can go ahead and read the next one too. We have already submitted any interim Form 2B. Will we get any feedback on the questions and changes in order to fill out, correct, and complete Form 2B information on eForm? The answer to that is yes. The staff will work with the operators individually to both update interim form into the eForm format. And we will also provide feedback consistent with the process for either completeness or technical review. And general answer to that question is yes, we'll always work with the operators to answer questions at those stages. Another question to Form 2B related: does the new 2B need to be filed before the application can be deemed complete, or can the completeness check occur before the new 2B is submitted? And this is regarding the interim 2Bs. And ideally, the answer is yes, that we will get the eForm filing before they go through, but we'll work with each operator who has an OGDP in process at this time. Any Form 2Bs submitted after today must be submitted on the eForm 2B. The eForm 2B is now available to operators.
Great, thank you, John.
That's that, thanks.
The next question is, will links to the reclamation inspection be included in the output of the reclamation status report?
Hannah?
Yeah.
The answer to that is no. The status report includes a link to the scout card for the well. It also includes the document number of the field inspection report but it does not have a link to those inspection reports.
Great, thanks, Jane. And the next question is for you as well. Jane, will the interim reclamation inspection be the time from the beginning of the site and all the time the well is in production until P&A of the well and site?
Almost. Interim reclamation starts after the well is completed. While you have active drilling and completion operations, you're usually not reclaiming anything, but as soon as those are over, the expectation is that the location is shrunk in to the minimal amount necessary for production operations, and that is the interim reclamation start. And yeah, it goes until you come back in and plug that well.
Great, thanks, Jane. And the next question is also in your wheelhouse. What does no reclamation status mean?
It means that we don't have an inspection in which the inspector noted anything about reclamation. That doesn't always happen. So,
all right.
Hope that answers.
Thank you, Jane. The next question seems to not be a question, but a statement. So I'll just read it so that you can respond to it, Sean or Denise or Mike. It says, CDOT tracking pads are from dirt to paved streets as referenced in page 20 of the CDOT Pocket Guide. Nowhere in the CDOT guide does OIT reference tracking pads from dirt to dirt lease roads, with exclamation points at the end.
Yeah, Denise, do you want to take that one?
Sure. So the way we look at these situations, CDOT is a guide for operators. There are several BMP'S. It's up to the operator to choose the correct BMP for that particular situation. And sediment movement is sediment movement, regardless of whether it's going from a dirt road to a dirt road or a dirt road to a paved road.
All
So
right.
the CDOT is guide. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Denise. And the next question says, Western Slope operators have seen a significant increase in corrective actions since October of 2020. And based on a review of corrective actions issued in the DJ Basin versus Western Slope, it seems that there may be a change in interpretation of Rule 1002.f, which is inconsistently being applied across the state and across operators. How can the COGCC ensure consistency among its inspectors?
I'll take that, Hannah. The increase is probably because we finally got all our inspectors on that on the Western Slope certified through the training. There's not an inconsistency. We do send all our inspectors to the same training. One thing that's different between the DJ and parts of the Western Slope, which doesn't include La Plata County, is they have the counties and local municipalities have some very stringent stormwater rules as well that require many BMP'S and prevention of tracking out onto the roads. So the locations are stabilized to the point where we don't see the same problems.
All right, great. Thank you for that, Mike. The next question is, please describe in detail your expectation for stabilization on a well pad surface.
Yeah, Denise, do you want to take the next view here?
Okay. So our expectation is that the operator choose their own BMP'S for their particular location and roads. That would be up to the operator. We want to make sure that there are good stabilization on the location, but we're not going to tell the operator how that has to happen. That's up to them.
Thank you, Denise.
And in addition, I think, the question is expectation for stabilization. Stabilization is there's no sediment movement off of that pad. And whatever BMP'S you have to use to accomplish that is what you need to do.
Thank you, Mike. The next question is there any consideration being given to access roads and well pads in rural areas? Graveled surfaces typically go through a seasonal thaw that results in a temporary softening of the stabilized surface. Annual maintenance is a part of all operator programs, and it seems there is a new unwritten policy that COGCC now requires constant blading and re-graveling during the seasonal change when the soil is dry and more stable.
I can take that, Mike, just quickly. Again, it's the same concept, is that that location needs to be stabilized, and the operator needs to consult with an engineer or a consultant on how you might stabilize that location, those locations and those roads in all seasons. So stormwater isn't just for a certain season. It's almost more important when you do have these seasonal changes that they do have proper BMPs to take care of them, to take care of the situation.
Thank you, Denise. Now the next one is a several part question. So I think I'll read like the first part and then you can answer it, and then I'll read the next part and you can answer that. So the first part is, can you please explain COGCC's relationship with CDPHE, if any, in regards to the COR for 00000 permit?
Mike, do you want me to take that one?
Sure, and I can add on if need be.
That would be great. So CDPHE has a construction permit, a general construction permit that operators are required to acquire. And that stormwater permit does have a requirement to have a stormwater plan included in the permitting process. That is a CDPHE permitting process. Their location should have a specific plan. When you, well, CDPHE's permit says that you need to sign the permit that says you have the plan, but they don't actually look at the plan. So additionally, we've had several conversations and interactions with CDPHE about particular BMPs. But the issue here, I think, maybe what this question is getting to is that the permit for CDPHE is per their rules, and we have our own stormwater rules. So operators need to abide by our rules and CDPHE rules, not just one or the other.
Thank you, Denise. The next part of that question is, please describe the difference between minimize and control. The 2008 SBP explained it differently than how it is being implemented by inspectors. Oftentimes, the difference in these terms is the result of an inspector finding ACA being sufficiently fixed.
So I'm not sure the context of how those words are being used. So it really just it depends on how those particular words are being used and in what context. Okay.
Thank you, Denise. To the person who wrote that question, if you would like more clarification, just type in another question and we'll get to it at the bottom. The next part of that is, CDPHE does not use riling as indicator of off-site sediment transport. Why does COGCC? If existing slope stabilization is minimizing sediment transport as designed, but riling is occurring, CDPHE does not find this to be out of compliance with the permit due to efforts to minimize transport. Would COGCC find this to be a corrective action?
I guess the short answer to that question is yes. It would. Rilling is an indication that the situation, typically the slope or the fill slope, are not stabilized. So when you have rilling, it's an indication that it's not being stabilized properly. So the answer is yes. We would write that up as a corrective action.
Great,
And
thank you.
If I could add on to that, as Denise mentioned before, and to some of these other questions, the CDOT manual is just a guideline. It's not the rule. It's a place for everyone to start.
Okay, thank you, Mike. And you were cutting out a little bit. So what he said was that it's just a guideline. It's not in our rules, and that it's just a place to start. The next question is, one of the success, in quotations, photos showed riprap without matting. Some inspectors write up corrective actions for not using good engineering practices. Why was this situation a success without matting? I would assume that's for Sean.
I think I can address that one. I guess, these are really specific questions, and this isn't really the format for that. We would need to see what the photos look like, what the inspection looked like, so on and so forth. So I think unless Mike wants to talk about that, I think we might want to move on.
Yeah, and I'm not sure which photo we're talking about, but that's just one part of the whole situation. If matting is not needed and the location is stabilized with the riprap, then that's what you need. It's appropriate BMPs. We have to look at the entire location, as Sean mentioned, the whole location, not just this and not just that. So if that was an appropriate BMP and it stopped stormwater movement and sediment movement, then that's all you need.
All right, thank you, Mike, and thank you, Denise. And the next question is, are CDOT guidelines incorporated by reference in the current COGCC rules? If not, can COGCC require operators to follow the CDOT manual and the CDPHE guideline? There are likely inconsistencies between the two, which makes compliance objectives tricky.
Again, as I've stated before, it's just a guideline. We can't make them follow CDOT rules. It's something that's been put out in the past, and it's a good guideline booklet.
All right, thank you, Mike.
Everything has to function the way you just have to prevent sediment movement is the idea behind the whole thing.
Great, thank you, Mike. The next question is a suggestion. Next training should show photos without obvious stormwater concerns. There are many subjective situations that need help navigating. I don't know.
And thanks for that. No, and I think we can do that. I think that can be incorporated. That's a good suggestion.
Great, thank you, Amanda, for that suggestion. The next question is 1002.f.big F, vehicle tracking control practices to control potential sediment discharges from operational roads, well pads, and other unpaved surfaces. Practices should include road and pad design and maintenance to minimize rutting and tracking, controlling site access, street sweeping or scraping, tracking pads, wash racks, education, or other sediment controls. This rule does not require a tracking pad. Does COGCC intend to require a tracking pad at every location, entrance, or access road endpoint? Or will track pads be required on new construction only? It seems that a change this significant would require a rule change.
So I can take part of that, Denise, if you want to jump in. As you read the rule, practices should include road and pad design to minimize rutting and tracking. Therefore, if you do that in the first place, no, you don't require a tracking pad. A tracking pad is the last BMP when you can't stop everything else. I don't foresee at this point in time us requiring a tracking pad. We are requiring the appropriate BMPs to prevent sediment movement. And Denise, if you or Sean, if you have any other thoughts.
Really, the best way, and I think Sean mentioned this, the best way to deal with the situation is to have your pad and your roads stabilized. Then no tracking pad is required. So it depends on the situation.
Okay, thank you, Mike and Denise. And the next question looks like it's for John. Are there going to be word limitations in the Form 2B fields?
The answer to that is that's going to vary over the form, like many eForm documents. Some will have character limits, some won't. While we're working through this, if the limitations are too restrictive, we'll make adjustments.
Okay, excellent. And that looks like that's the questions for now, but the last one was sent in at 10:03, so we'll give them another minute or so. And then I'm gonna put up, as soon as I can figure out how to get out of the screen I was in, my what the next operator meeting is. Oh, no, one more. Okay. All right, I think that was a pretty decent amount of time for someone to type something in if they had another question. Of course, if you do have questions later on that pop up, just write them down and we will get to them at the next meeting, which is going to be Tuesday, April 20th, of course, starting at 9 as usual. And then if you need to be added to the operator email list, just email me and I'll add you. Anybody can be added to the list. We just didn't want it to be a free for all, that's all. So that's why you have to email me for me to put you in manually. So do that if you would like to receive our emails. If you think you might be on the list but you're not receiving our emails, please check your spam folder. We are using Constant Contact, which is a sales outreach program. And so it sometimes goes to spam folders. And yeah, I think with that, we'll go ahead and conclude. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming to the meeting. Thank you for all the great thought-provoking questions that everybody asked. The next meeting is going to be on the 20th of April, and we'll see you then. Take care.
Thanks, Hannah.
Thanks, Hannah, for facilitating.
Thanks, everyone. Yeah, thank you for all the nice compliments everyone keeps sending me. I appreciate those. And as soon as I get all these things off my screen, I'll end this. Have a great day, guys. Oh, goodness. There we go.